So our team at ISD have done quite a lot of work, both with businesses, but also on schools and youth communities, to think about how to build resilience against disinformation and other kinds of online harms. And transparency and clarity of communication with peers and peer networks is really critical to that. So here we're really thinking about getting ahead of the curve on these issues, building resilience, helping people understand critical thinking about information, rather than debunking information after the fact, which can often be counterproductive or really difficult to achieve success with. So the advice that I would give to businesses or organizations working with large audiences or consumers is to always consider transparency and clarity in your messaging, and to make sure you're directing people to sources of information about your products or your organization that are clear and trustworthy. And that's really the first step that we can take to make sure that we're all taking part in a much more open information system that doesn't promote these kinds of disinformation or conspiracy theory.
It's really interesting you talk about the potentially negative impact of debunking after the fact. Is it more important then to kind of nip it in the bud before anything becomes unclear?
Yeah, there's certainly always a time in which these ideas can become embedded quite deeply in someone's head. So the sooner that we can ensure that people have the right information in front of them, the better. There's very mixed research about fact checking and debunking. It's certainly not a useless tool by any means, and there are often examples where it can be extremely helpful in providing the right information after the fact. But the evidence suggests we have to be quite particular about the ways in which we do that to make sure people don't go further down the rabbit hole of their belief system and take fact checkers themselves, for example, as a sort of enemy or opponent who's trying to convince them of false information as well. So debunking after the fact, has its use cases, but it's very difficult to get right. Whereas preventative stuff like digital resilience and citizenship work can really help to make sure that people are just taking the steps they can to find accurate and truthful information rather than getting in those difficult spots in the first place.
Definitely. There's an element of no one likes to be wrong. And if you have information that you firmly believe in and someone corrects you, you become defensive to it.
Absolutely. We did some really interesting experiments in the extremism domain, thinking about extremist propaganda, which itself is obviously a form of false information a lot of the time. And we tried to engage people who were sharing or promoting that violent propaganda in one-on-one conversations online to try and sow a seed of doubt in their belief system. And we tested different tones of voice, different messengers, to really try and understand how and who can connect with these people successfully and maybe draw them out of that very embedded belief system that they've gotten into. It's a very difficult job, and it takes a lot of human resource. There's not a silver bullet for solving these kind of problems. But there are ways that you can frame and message these kind of issues that do help people to have a bit of cognitive dissonance from a conspiracy, a piece of disinformation, or some extremist propaganda that they might have been exposed to.